Alright, first review, back from Metrocon. Alright, back onto the tripod, microphone. Good, white balance works. Alright, back to business here. Let's get back to... What have I been reviewing? I'm firing that AI. So let's get this channel back on track now that I'm home from Metrocon, and look who was waiting for me when I got home. Sending in a box from BBTS waiting to be unpacked, Titan's Return Misfire. A Target Master now upgraded into a Headmaster because that's all we're making in this toy line. Just like his G1 self, he's a very futuristic space fighter with a very cool shape to him. It's very, let's say, Star Wars. Let's see if that gets any of the Trek fans up in a tizzy. But I do really like, I've always really liked Misfire's shape from the down-sloping canopy as well as these forks coming off the front. He's always looked really cool and just really space age. This looks like something, and I've made the joke before in many of the videos, this looks like something that should be flying like this way in an old 8-bit video game. Really like the look, really like it. He is done up in a very nice magenta plastic all over. There's very few bits of plastics visible in this mode that aren't. A little bit of gunmetal gray, a little bit of off-white showing through, and of course the translucent blue for the cockpit. But beyond that, he's very dominant in that magenta color. He's looking really cool. This works, and it's very Decepticon. I like it. Keeping to some of Titan's Return's classic imagery, we have a lot of paint apps, a lot of tampagraphs going on to make it look like he's stickered up with some of his classic details. And there's little dabs of paint across a few very specific points on him to give him a little bit more character and break up the magenta just a little bit. Excellently done. You can see the Decepticon emblem standing right there. Across the top, we have a little bit more paint, this time in white, as well as more sticker detail, which is obviously meant for the legs once we get them transformed. Beyond that, doing pretty good as far as just appearances. He is a very cool, solid-looking figure. Arms are a little exposed, but that's not a huge deal here because it's futuristic. You can get away with it. One thing I will say, there's no landing gear of any kind on this guy, so a little bit of beware of how you handle him, especially because his lowest point on his body, where the toy rests on your desk or table, is going to be painted, so he does have a little bit of a scratch issue if you handle him a little bit too roughly or slide him around or at all. So be aware of that before you go a little bit too rough with him. So let's see what else he has in store. Open him up. Full cockpit section for a Titan Master to actually ride in. Set that aside, and we'll take a look at his partner, Aimless. Aimless was originally his Target Master, which when you turn into a gun, that's a very bad name to have. When you're a pilot, that's even worse. You know what I really like about Aimless? Paint. You can see that lavender and blue painted for his face, so his face actually stands out. He actually looks like somebody. And he's actually 3 plastic colors, which I did not expect. This is automatically one of Hasbro's best attempts at a Titan Master, and all it took was 1 extra color of plastic and a couple dabs of paint. So, congratulations, Hasbro. This should have been the norm. So, we're going to go ahead and shuffle him into his head mode, and we'll show that off a little bit later. Now, for this, we'll go ahead and get his guns off. They plug in sideways into what will be his shoulders. That way I'll give you a quick, clean look at the vehicle mode sans weaponry, just in case you were curious about that. For Titan Master playability, 2 pegs at the top, so you can have them standing completely straight up as you fly through hyperspace. That will always be a funny image in my head. I don't care how many times I bring it up. So, let's get him transformed. Now, the toy itself is a remold of Trigger Happy, though it's a pretty extensive one once you get the hang of it. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and get the arms and wings out of the way. I do that just so I have a little bit more clearance, just so it's easier to see what I'm doing from here on out. So legs fold out like so. Flip out the feet, and that'll also flip the heels out the back, split those up, bring them forward so we can bring his pelvic area into place. Make sure that's nice and tight in there. From there, we're going to undo his cockpit section, or his front nose cone. Bring that back to form a backpack there. Now his wings have to rotate around. They are on these big hinge struts, and then the arms have to rotate around as well. So it gets a little bit cluttered, but you can do it. It is manageable. And then flipping out the hands like so. Keep thumbnails a little bit long for that, because it is a little bit tab to get grip onto. So that done, I like to put the wings a little back, give me some clearance on his arms, and from there we are ready to latch the head into place, and that gives us our Titan's Return Misfire in his completed robot mode. It's a very similar transformation. It doesn't have quite as many little tricks to him that made the trigger happy version of the mold so cool and like so popular amongst fans. But for the most part, you're looking at a very, very, very solid figure with a nice little transformation to him. Taking a look now that we have the head on the body, like Hasbro does, they have leaned more toward the toy than the cartoon. The fuchsia face is the key to that. Blue visor, black head, and a little bit of purple toward the back, thanks to how he transforms, of course. So he is one of those headmasters that kind of just looks like a face on a block. But it doesn't really affect him too much. He still looks very much like the vintage Target Master. If you even recall the vintage Target Master. We're getting to year 4, so the nostalgia wears a little bit thin here. So we've added in a lot of white plastic. It's a little bit off-white, not too much though, in order to break up all of that magenta. And there's some new paint apps to be had here as well, and little bits of gunmetal gray showing through. First off, his proportions are fantastic. He gets narrow in the chest, in the hips, in the waist. Very broad shoulders that stick up a little. This is about where I like my Transformers, especially if you're still trying to be like a sleek-looking flyer in any way. He manages very, very nicely. So, added in details, we do have plenty of new molding here for the chest. We have this area in the center painted up in white and red. It's the only place where red even appears on the toy, so good there. White for the kneecaps. Of course, this is the detail we saw at the back of the vehicle mode. It works a little bit better here in robot mode. And yeah, a lot going on, but it's still pretty much what we saw before and pretty solid. Doesn't do any kind of color changing or anything. Just straight up a Decepticon that means business. I do dig him. Do dig him a lot. Now, let's give a quick comparison to Trigger Happy, just so we know what we're dealing with here. And if you're not too familiar with how Titans Return remolds figures, you haven't been watching the channel much, have you? But take a look at the toy. It's really just the thighs downward where the toy is the same. Like, even the pelvis section is completely different from itself. If we can look, he doesn't even have that pelvis trick that during his transformation that Misfire has. So there's even elements of the transformation that aren't the same between these two guys. So you have very distinct toys, even though they do share parts, those legs being the only real thing. That's really cool, and it's exceptionally cool to see just how many tricks they have come up with in order to make these toys distinct, even though some of them do share components. Calling Misfire a remold is kind of a disservice, because yes, he's similar, but he has so many of his own tricks, and he does things very differently. It's just parts of him are from the original toy, so technically he is. It's a disservice. This toy is, I'd say about 70% new parts, so, and even new engineering, as we've seen. So, getting into the articulation roundup here, head, ball jointed, of course, because that's how these Titan Masters work. Hinge here, the torso, means the arm on a ball socket has plenty of range. Actually, no, it's not. I keep getting fooled by this mold. It's not a ball joint. It's a pin. So you got universal range, but it's that awkward universal range where I feel like I should be able to move it in directions that I can't, so, which is annoying, but you can get most of what you need. Full bicep rotation, a 90-degree elbow, no bend at the wrist, unfortunately. He does have a waist rotation, which always makes me happy. Thighs fully ball jointed. Swivel there at the hips. Hips are painted, actually, now that I look at it, so those are actually a little bit tighter than I would expect. And then that also means the knees are a little bit tighter, too. They're actually very, very solid on mine. These feel very secure. They're not going to move around or anything or lose position. Nothing at the ankles, though they are slanted for a more natural stance. But what this means is you get a very, very articulated warrior. It's got just about everything you need. I don't really see any articulation points that I'm missing out of this. To continue on, you also have those guns that we pulled from his original vehicle mode. The guns themselves are the Titan Master combining style, which means they look half hollow if you're not holding them the right way. And unfortunately, on these, you kind of have to. No matter which handle you use, that big gap is showing, which is unfortunate, but hey, it's what you have to do. So you're going to want to use, like, even though you have like pegs all over these things, in order to peg in wherever you want, you have to use the long ones in order to fit in his forearm, or in order to fit on his hands, I should say. And he looks decent enough, but of course, the whole point of these kind of gimmicks is to combine the guns into one massive cannon, which not only does actually kind of harken back a little bit more to his Target Master, it also gives you a spot for a Titan Master to ride in, should you want one in this mode as well. It's an option, it's play value, it's a line-wide gimmick, so as long as there's integration there, I'm more than happy. So, I can't help but notice, the way it bulks out of the sides actually reminds me of like a Target Master gun with the arms of the robot just hanging off to the side. I don't know if that's intentional or not, but the imagery, I think, is interesting. So that, my friends, is Titan's Return Misfire. He will be described as a remold of Trigger Happy, but he definitely is not. The lower legs are the same, but a lot of the transformation engineering is his own, and he does feel like a completely different toy. So don't give him a pass just because he shares a few parts with a previous figure, because the previous figure was one of the best in the line, keep in mind. So if you're into this futuristic space age design, and I'm really into it, this is a really nice toy to pick up.